Senator Mark Daly, a member of Ireland's Parliament. Senator, thank you for your time. I'm curious, how do people in Ireland feel right now about President Biden's visit to the country?
Well, there's a great love for President Biden in Ireland. He has been a part of the story of Irish America for a long time and has been a great supporter of peace in Northern Ireland since the beginning of the peace process. And of course, this peace process has been supported by successive US administration, whether Republican or Democrat, members of the US House of Representatives and of course the US Senate and presidents have always been supportive of the peace process. And this year we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. We're alive in Ireland today because of the bipartisan support of successive US administrations.
The New York Times reporting on the president's visit this morning and characterizing it as this, Biden is dipping his toes into the diplomatic waters in Northern Ireland, and also avoiding getting pulled into the nation's domestic policies. Is that a tough, tight rope to walk right now for a U.S. president?
I mean, it has been a challenge all the way through the history of Northern Ireland and the peace process for the United States of America, being an honest broker, working with the UK government and the Irish government, and making sure that the peace process was kept on track, because the signing of the Good Friday Agreement 25 years ago this week was only the beginning of the process, and the US steadfast support on Capitol Hill, but in the White House, regardless of who was there. And it's always a tightrope, you know, because you're dealing with different communities in Northern Ireland with different agendas. But I think the appointment by President Trump of Mick Mulvaney as a special envoy, an economic envoy, and by President Biden of Joe Kennedy III as a special economic envoy shows the US support for Ireland and for the peace process, because a prosperous Northern Ireland economically will mean that young people who live in those disadvantaged areas in Northern Ireland will not be sucked into the paramilitaries that are still in existence, that are basically involved in criminality and in racketeering. But with US support and the support of our EU colleagues, we're going to make sure that the peace process continues for decades and centuries to come. But as I said at the beginning, because of the United States' involvement in the peace process, there are people alive in Ireland, thousands of people alive, because they got involved over 25 years ago.
Right, and the goal is to continue to keep the peace and bolstering those agreements that helped so many decades ago to end the violence there. The president, while in Ireland, President Biden will engage with the leaders of the 5 main political parties. Not much is being made public about what he is saying. What do you anticipate to come out of those meetings?
Well, I suppose one of the things that we would wish there was more success on is ensuring that the Stormont Assembly, which is basically similar to what the Scottish Assembly is to Scotland in terms of local government decisions being made locally, that has not been in operation for the last number of years, because the political parties in Northern Ireland cannot agree on certain aspects. And the president has used all the force of his office and his weight of personality to try and get the leaders to sit down and make sure that, for the benefit of all the people in Northern Ireland and for future generations, that democracy works. And there has been an election, and we want to make sure that Northern Ireland has a functioning government. But the real success of the peace process is that there are more jobs now in Northern Ireland than there was 5 years ago, and there is stability, but there is still, and US steadfast support and the bipartisan support has been important for that. Of course, this is a celebration of Irish America as well. There are nearly 40 million Americans have Irish heritage. We have an American-Irish state legislators caucus in all states, a bipartisan support for Ireland, and many of those have passed resolutions supporting the Good Friday Agreement on its 25th anniversary. But we've had President Kennedy 60 years ago this year addressed our Parliament, and tomorrow we'll have a joint sitting of our Senate and our House of Representatives with President Biden. President Reagan also addressed a joint sitting of our houses, and of course we've had President Clinton as well, who was very important in the peace process 25 years ago, as was President Bush subsequently, because as difficulties emerged in the implementation of the peace process, successive US presidents have ensured that the White House has always remained involved. But President Biden will be spending time in his ancestral homes in County Louth and County Mayo, and will be enjoying meeting his relatives who are very proud of his achievements.
All right, a celebratory visit, an important relationship then and now, and certainly in the future. Senator Mark Daly, thank you. We've also been looking at some beautiful images from above of the country of Ireland and some of your gorgeous coastlines. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much. All right,
thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.